Hello everyone, I received a comment under another Little deFormer 3 video on my YouTube channel asking whether it is a granular synth or just a granular effects box. Now, I hadn't really considered the difference much because I've always just been working with whatever granular possibilities I had on the devices I used them, but I thought, hey, maybe let's just explore the granular possibilities of the Little deFormer 3 together in a video like this. Now, before we start with Little deFormer 3 though, I'd like to show you the Bastl Instruments MicroGranny 2, because this has been my introduction to granular sampling and granular synthesis in general, and it's still a very cool and very easy to use instrument. The MicroGranny 2 can record and play back samples, and it comes with very famous samples like this one, for example.
Our desires are artificial.
Or this one.
There is nothing spontaneous.
But also some more musical ones. Okay, so once you have loaded the sample here onto those preset buttons, you can of course also loop them, and then you can add granular processing to them. And what that basically means is that you choose a grain size, which is basically a window or a new start and end point of the sample. And inside of this window, the sample keeps looping. So let's have a look at that. I'm just going to loop this first sample here.
Our desires are artificial. Our desires are artificial. Our desires
and now I can choose a grain size. So yeah, like I said, it's like a window, a new start and end point. Now, the Bastl MicroGranny 2 also allows me to move that window continuously then, creating the typical granular synthesis effect. I can also move it backwards. And this of course also works on the more musical samples like this. Okay, so this is basically an introduction to granular sampling or granular synthesis. So we have a waveform, and then, like I said, we just choose a small part, a small grain, and then we can move that grain around. And other instruments offer the possibility to have multiple grains playing at the same time in different directions with different lengths and so on. But yeah, this is just the very basics. Now let's move to the Little deFormer 3. And because we already know the samples we've just heard, let's just quickly record them onto the Little deFormer 3. I could also just load them via a USB stick, but sampling is very quick on the Little deFormer 3, so let's just do that right now. I've got a new preset set up here, and I can simply go to the Sample Quick Record menu, and then I can just audition the sample.
Our desires are
check that the volume is fine.
Our desires are artificial.
And then, yeah, I've already set like a threshold, so I can just basically press the record button. It'll wait for an audio signal to come in, and I'll just hold the button here to start the sample.
Our desires are artificial.
Then I press stop. I can audition the sample again.
Our desires are artificial.
Yeah, that's fine for now. Let's save it. Let's call that just MG2, and then that's sample 1. So MicroGranny 2 sample 1, save, and that's fine. And then quickly let's record the piano sample as well. So again, record, and all right, and that's it. Let's just save it. Call that MicroGranny 2 sample 2, save, and that's it. Now I can of course edit the sample on the device here. So for example, we can just load our first sample, which we just recorded, into the sample editor. Then we have the graphical display of the waveform. We can of course zoom in and out, and maybe adjust the endpoint a little bit because I think the sample looped there.
Our desires are artificial.
Yeah, we have this little at the end. So yeah, let's just erase that by just setting the endpoint a little here. We can also zoom in a little more. Yeah, so I guess around here should be fine. Let's play it again.
Our desires are artificial.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so that's our new endpoint. We can then save this as a new sample. Let's just do that right now. Into sample bank A. It'll save that. So now let's try what the MicroGranny 2 did to the sample with the little deFormer 3. First, of course, I have to assign the sample to an oscillator or to a part. So I go to the oscillator menu, and then we go to select, and we just turn that mode into sample. And then we can load a sample into one of 4 slots. And the last edited or recorded sample has a red dot, so we can easily see it. So we'll just load that sample and we can directly play it back.
Our desires are artificial.
Okay, that's great. So now on the oscillator page, we can adjust the start and also the length of our sample, which we have loaded into this slot. So with the start point,
desires are artificial. Desires are artificial.
And down here we also see like a small representation of the waveform. And of course we can set the sample to loop. And then let's set the start point to 0 again, and the length will define the endpoint from the start point. So let's see what happens when we dial that down. Okay, so now we start to have this granular effect by just taking a very small slice of the waveform. And of course now the fun starts when we modulate this. So here on the mod page, we can modulate the start. And on the mod 2 page, we can modulate the length of the sample. So let's do that right now with the start. And for the start, we could, for example, choose a sequencer track, a modulation sequencer track. So this is sequencer track 1. We can just quickly jump there. Control track 1, modulation track 1. We can just draw something in, and then when I play back the sequencer, it'll go through those values. And now when I go back to the oscillator and play the sound, we can hear the start point moving around according to what we just drew on the sequencer. Now we of course can also have a random generator or just an LFO as a modulation source. And now we already see how it's moving around. Now, LFOs are bipolar, so I want to set the start point a little bit higher.
Our desires are artificial. Our desires are artificial.
So let's go to the length now, and this one, and set it to the sequencer track. So we modulate the length with the sequencer track. Also set the amount. And then let's listen to that again. So now we have a 1-grain granular effect going here. And of course we can now play this on the keyboard. And of course we can also sequence that. Okay, I think you get the idea. Let's change that sample now by going to the oscillator menu again, the sample, and use the piano sound instead. And then let's listen to how it sounds. Let's play back the sequence again. Add some longer gate lengths. And we can quantize this into a C major scale. Now the little deFormer 3 offers you to load 4 samples into the same sound slot, and they will be strung together as one big sample, and then you can move around across 4 samples if you wanted to. Or alternatively, you can also blend between two samples which are on top of each other. So there are also lots of possibilities just inside one sound slot here. For example, let's now load our first sample into the other slot. There it was. Now we have to set samples to 2. So it'll use the first 2 samples, and then using the chop point parameter, you can select which sample is playing. So that's the piano on chop 1, and then because there are no other chop points defined, we'll have our vocal sample on slot 2, playing from 64 onwards. Yeah, and that's just how it is, but that's also very easy to understand, I think. And now, of course, we can modulate the chop point here on the modulation page. Let's use a random generator for this. Random generator 1. Here. So with each key press, it'll generate a new random value, or with each trigger from the sequencer. Let's start the sequence. What you can hear now, and what you can also see here on those 8 bar graphs, is that because the Little deFormer 3 is 8 voice polyphonic, the samples can also overlap, or the grains of the sample voices can also overlap. And of course that is dependent on the gate length or on the track layout of the sequencer track, which can also be polyphonic. And now let's have a look at the granular effects. For this I'm going to choose part 2, and I'm just going to quickly mute part 1. And so on part 2, let's go to the oscillator menu again, switch the mode to sample, and then let's select our piano sample here at the end. Okay. Yeah, part 2. It's just the piano sample now, and we'll not morph or mangle this with the oscillator parameters, but we will send it to an audio bus, which we will then apply an insert effect to. And for this, we switch to the VCA, route this output to bus 2, and then on the bus page, we can just set bus 2 also sent to the right and left outputs, and then we can just simply go to the effects menu, put this effect number 1, this insert effect, on bus 2, where our piano is going to be playing. And let's see what we have. We have chorus, distortion, bit crush, pitch shift, and yeah, a bunch more. But let's take one of the glitch shift effects. And there we can enable this effect. And yeah, I'll just play on the keyboard. Okay, let's try another effect now. And yeah, there it is, the variator. Switch that on. So this is like a granular delay kind of effect. Yeah, and there are several more effects as insert effects, but there are also 2 output effects. Let's go back to the bus and then just send our piano not to the audio out directly, but to the output effect 1. And we can simply select that output effect 1, and currently that's a delay as a default value, but it's off. But here we can choose different effects, for example, the granulator, which is an output effect affecting the whole bus and then being sent out via the left and right outputs. So yeah, here we also have like the size of our grain and the amount of grains, and we can also modulate that with the controller track, which we did earlier, you know, the controller track 1, for example. Okay, let's see what else we have here. There's a granulator, which is also synced to a sequence and not just modulated by one. And then we have a crossfade granulator effect. So this is a lot smoother and less stuttery than the original granulator, for example. Yeah, and so you have a bunch of options. You can have your granular synth stuff happening on the sample level, or on an insert effect, or on an output effect at the end of the signal chain. Alright, this concludes this video overview of the Little deFormer 3's granular tools. If you have more questions, post them in the comments below, and check out the manual for a description of all the different effects you have on the device. And yeah, hit subscribe if you like this video and want to see more. And yeah, then see you in the next one. Thanks a lot for watching, and goodbye.
Our desires are